Britain is exporting military equipment to Russia through Central Asia, Sky News. British companies are exporting hundreds of millions of pounds worth of equipment and machinery to Russia. This was reported by Sky News. According to the publication, goods, drone equipment, optical materials and heavy equipment are sent to the countries of the Caucasus and Central Asia, including Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Uzbekistan and other countries. From there, this equipment will be sent to Russia. Figures show that large volumes of sensitive, dual-use goods from Britain are still heading to Moscow, despite a sharp drop in the flow of goods to Russia after trade sanctions were imposed following the war in Ukraine 2 years ago. This will help to provide the Russian army with spare parts and equipment for the weapons it is using against Ukraine. After the sanctions were applied, the transfer of British goods to Russia decreased by 74%. Most of the exports to Russia are food, medical supplies and other humanitarian goods. The flow of heavy equipment, electrical equipment and cars has dropped to almost zero. The representative of the British government said that the package of the most serious economic sanctions introduced against a large economy was introduced, and these figures mean that the sanctions regime was extremely successful. However, a closer look at official UK trade statistics provides an alternative lens. They show that while UK exports to Russia have fallen sharply, the country's exports to a number of ex-Soviet states, from Uzbekistan to Georgia, have grown at an unprecedented rate. It is noted that British exports to Kyrgyzstan grew by more than 1,100%. Heavy machinery and vehicles dominate these exports, as they can no longer be shipped directly to Russia. Robin Brooks, the former chief economist of the IFF Financial Institute, said that other European countries, in particular, Germany and Poland, have been engaged in sending large quantities of equipment to Russia through the Caucasus, Central Europe and Asian countries for some time. It is clear that they are taking orders from one of these Central Asian countries, says the expert. Officials say they are constantly working to strengthen the UK's sanctions regime. We recently announced the creation of a new Office of Trade Sanctions Enforcement to strengthen sanctions. Failure to comply with these strict sanctions is a serious crime and can result in significant financial penalties or criminal prosecution, the British official said. The USA does not see the necessary conditions for negotiations on Ukraine, Blinken. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva that Washington does not see conditions for diplomacy regarding the situation in Ukraine, Reuters reports. When Blinken and Lula da Silva talked about the conflict in Ukraine, the U.S. Secretary of State openly said that he does not see conditions for diplomacy, the agency said in a statement. Moscow has repeatedly expressed readiness for talks, but Kyiv has imposed a legislative ban on them. Earlier, the Kremlin stated that there are currently no conditions for the situation in Ukraine to transition to a peaceful direction, that the absolute priority for Russia is to achieve the goals of the special operation, and for now this will be done only by military means. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that if Ukraine wants a negotiation process, no mediators are needed, only the cancellation of the decree prohibiting negotiations with Russia is necessary. According to him, Russia has never been against a peaceful solution to the conflict in Ukraine. NATO wants to assume the role of coordinator in the delivery of weapons to Kyiv, Zakharova. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is about to assume the role of coordinator of the supply of arms to the Kyiv regime, thereby openly declaring its direct involvement in the conflict in Ukraine. Maria Zakharova, the official representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, informed about this, writes RIA Novosti. Zakharova noted that NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made an important statement. Stoltenberg made it clear that, now the issue of providing military aid to Kyiv will be discussed not only in the Ramstein format, but also at the meetings of the Ukraine NATO Council. In other words, despite the difficulties associated with the separation of military aid to Kyiv, edition, by the US and the EU, the alliance, in fact, wants to take on the role of coordinating the supply of weapons to the Zelensky regime. As it turns out, NATO is speaking openly about its direct participation in the conflict, said Zakharova's statement.